Okay. Okay, nice. Then after this presentation of the program, also from Students for Future, I would like to thank you, especially to Alejandra Watanabe, that is coming from Peru. Alejandra, you can say hi to Alejandra Watanabe. She's from Tierra Activa. Lina Yassin, she's from Sudan. Hi, Lina. Thank you for your time and for sharing what you are going to share today. And I'm pretty sure we are going to be very excited after listening what you have to say. And Heeta Lakhani from India. Thank you, Heeta, also for your time. She is a very great activist like Alejandra and Lina. They are working very hard in the field of climate change in different aspects. You will see afterwards in some minutes. But yeah, saying this, I would like to present, to have the time for Alejandra for sharing sharing your presentation, because every participant now will have 3 or 4 minutes to present what they are doing in the field of climate change, which kind of organization they are part of, and yeah, then we'll continue Heeta and then Lina. Okay, Alejandra, you can share your, yeah, nice.
Hi everyone, can you see my slide, or you're seeing my notes? Right, okay. So thank you, Meli, for this. As Meli said, my name is Alejandra Watanabe. I'm from Peru right now. I'm living in California. I just started a PhD program in Latin American Latino studies, trying to become activist scholar. Is that even possible? So, well, I'm going to briefly present what I've been doing, like who I am, and hopefully it will be less than 4 minutes. So I want to start saying that I'm a communicator, and I've been working in climate and environmental issues for the past 10 years, probably. And yeah, and in 2014, I became part of Tierra Activa Peru. Tierra Activa Peru is a national climate and environmental justice movement. It started as a youth movement, but with years, we are expanding our demographics. We work under the premises of cultivar, tejer, sanar, which is to cultivate, to weave, and to heal. So what do we say yes to, right? We say yes to love, to our communities, to our land, to protection of our territories. And we've been working, I joined Tierra Activa and became more actively involved in climate justice in 2014. Then I became more active in the international climate justice movement too. I was fortunate enough to be in some of these COPs meetings. Were very interesting and heartbreaking at the same time. So I decided to try to find new ways to keep doing activist work. And then I thought, well, maybe a master's, it's a good space. And then now a PhD program. So, well, what I'm working on, what I'm interested in general, and I have to say Tierra Activa has inspired my work, my academic work. Yeah, it has inspired my academic work. Okay. So yeah, Tierra Activa has inspired my work, my academic work, and yeah, it actually changed my life. In the look for justice and social justice, Tierra Activa has been key for me. So what do we do? What do I do? What I'm interested in? I'm trying to do climate justice and use the colonial and intersectional approaches to look at climate justice, right? And why the colonial intersectional approaches? Because as you might know, maybe you don't, but Peru, as other post-colonial countries, and many countries in the global south, are going to be very affected for climate change. And this has to do with the historical and the historical, like the history of our countries, right? And climate change will exacerbate those structural inequalities. So it's not right. and it's not a consequence. It's not a coincidence that the impacts are going to be differentiated, and that there exists. Someone there forgot to turn off their microphone. Okay. So yeah, I'm sorry, I got distracted. So yeah, basically I'm trying to look at at why these impacts are differentiated, and the reason for it, and all the intersecting forms of oppression that climate change will exacerbate, right? So in Peru, climate justice demands are more related to the local impact they're going to have, to support adaptation measures, to include indigenous rights, and to find alternatives for development that go beyond extractivism, right? Peru, Peruvian economy is relies heavily on extractivism. So how to achieve gender equality? And I guess that's what it brings us together today, is that in climate policy and in gender and development policy, gender has become a buzzword, right? So how can we move past that moment? So gender is treated as ahistorical, apolitical, and when gender had a political history, right, behind a transformative history. So how do we bring back the political and personal from gender back to policy, right? Because we know that we're going to erase the UN and reimagine a world. But so how do we do that? And Meli, I'm going to finish in 1 minute. So some ideas is that to recognize experience, like the experience and embody experience of indigenous peoples and other cosmovisions, different knowledges, and they're mostly groups that have been historically marginalized, like indigenous communities. Another way is to focus on language and belonging, and think from different languages and expressions that can help us understand and find new ways and reimagine the world, right? And find new ways and new initiatives from decolonization, try to decolonize knowledge, just embracing this new, these different ways of seeing the world. And I think it was very fast, and yeah, I'm sorry, I wish I could have more time, but yeah, thank you, Miley.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. Sorry. Yeah, I recognize many things that you share. I'm very excited now since you're talking about my country, Peru. Thank you for addressing Peru and the things that we need to also work on. Heeta, now is your time. You can share now.
Sure. One moment. There, can you see my screen now? Okay, perfect. Yeah, so a little background about myself. I have a master's in environmental studies. I graduated in 2014. But then I learned German language, and I started working as a German language translator with a multinational company in India. And it was a nice job. It was fun, comfortable. I liked what I was doing. But it wasn't in the field of environment. And in 2015, when COP21 was happening, I wrote to my university. I wrote to a whole bunch of people because I didn't know how to get there. And somebody from my university said, okay, but we'd give you accreditation. And they sent me for 1 week. I didn't know anything about the COPs. I didn't know how, what happens in the negotiations. And I also didn't know who else from the delegation was there. So I didn't have any mentorship. I didn't have anything. So as a COP experience, it was, I can very truly say it was a waste. But the good thing that it did was it made me realize why I studied what I studied. I'd always wanted to be in the field of environment. I'd always liked being with nature ever since I was a little girl. And I came back and I quit my job. And I said, it doesn't matter what I'm doing, but I'm definitely going to be in the field of environment. So yeah, I wrote to people again and slowly got more and more involved. I started volunteering with people working in the field and some very well-known people actually. So it was a good starting point. I got a lot of mentorship. I got a lot of guidance right from there. And I got involved with a few other youth groups, and I went for COP26, in 2016 for COP22. That's when I got involved with something known as Yango. And for a lot of people who might not know what that is, Yango is the official youth constituency to the UNFCCC. So basically, the United Nations climate change body has 9 civil society constituencies, and one of that is for youth. And that's where I was introduced in 2016 to young people from across the world to this constituency. And this is where I actually got my step into the negotiation process and, learned a lot that time. And I came back, kept in touch, kept volunteering with the constituency. And here I am. I speak to you today as focal point for Yango for this year. And it's been an exciting experience. The best thing that it did to me was it made me realize the huge gap in knowledge that we have back in our country, back in India, on climate change. And even the simple basic science of climate change, or science of why we should protect our environment, was missing from our school curriculum. And I realized, the kids of today, my generation, the generations after me, forget the capacity, forget the technical skills, but they don't even have the basic knowledge equipped with them to face the climate crisis in the future. And they're the ones who are going to be facing the impacts the most of the climate crisis. So what started very organically was, it was very organically. I was talking to somebody who was teaching a class for environment studies in a school, and she said, why don't you come over tomorrow and talk to my kids about your experience in the negotiation. So this was my first sort of very informal talk that I had with them, and talking to them about, I think this was about COP23 that happened in 2017. And just trying to simplify basically the whole world of the UN to students back home, to make them understand that the policies that are made there, we're not aware of them. A lot of us are not aware of it, but they do affect our lives back home. And this slowly formulated. So at COP23, when I went, I had one of my closest friends from school who was there with me. She's a counseling psychologist. So she was very good with kids. So the two of us together formalized this slowly over time into a sort of program where we did with the schools and school students, especially on climate change education and environment education, simplifying what the COPs are, simplifying what the negotiations are, and how students can take action in their day-to-day lives. Other than this, I've also then slowly worked with a few other organizations. My latest project that I just finished in April was trying to organize an international conference in India. It was bridging the 3 pillars of biodiversity, economics, and climate change. Because while there's a lot of work happening individually, sometimes we miss this conversation between the 3 topics. And clearly, whether we like it or not, climate change is coming as a spoiler for economic development and for biodiversity. And it's because of human activities that we're sort of in this situation as of today with COVID and with the climate crisis that we're seeing. But unfortunately, we couldn't the conference couldn't take place. It was scheduled for mid-March and we had to cancel it because of COVID. So this is the program that I was talking about. It's slowly formalized into something that we said, become a green warrior. And I'm still participating at the COPs, and this was, I think, in Poland in COP24 in 2018, talking about something similar about the work that I was doing and doing a sort of climate change education short one-on-one with people at the COP. So that's more or less my journey, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Melissa, for this opportunity, and happy to share and discuss with all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Heeta. It's such a nice, inspiring work that you've been doing, and you still continued pushing up in not just India and very many countries else. So now, time for Lina. Lina, the time's for you now.
All right, thank you, Melissa, and thanks everyone. I'm really happy to be here and to be part of this discussion. I'm going to share my screen now, just to be great if you can confirm that you can see it. Can you see it? Okay, perfect.
So just to give a bit of a background, my name is Lina Yassin. I'm 22 now. I forgot because of Corona, but I'm 22 now. I work with Climate Tracker. I coordinate campaigns in Climate Tracker in the Middle East and North Africa. My journey with climate change started, I'm gonna try to make this quick. I think we're over time, but my journey with climate change started in 2013. My country was hit by massive flash floods, and a lot of people were, a lot of homes and a lot of homes were destroyed and people lost their life. I volunteered in a youth-led initiative to help those who were the victims of the flood. That experience made me realize, or made me question. I kept asking myself, why is this happening, and why are we not like responding to it in a better way? Why are those people dying and losing their families? I started reading and I came across climate change. Like that was the first time, like 2013, that was the first time I've heard of climate change. I was like, whoa, how come I don't know about this? And how come no one never told me about this, either in school or family or anything? So that's when I realized that there's a huge gap in climate change knowledge in Sudan, and I'm guessing that's the case in most global South countries, because we usually don't be taught about climate change in school. So I started writing more about climate change as a way to increase awareness in my school and in my university. Then I came across an opportunity offered by Climate Tracker to train environmental and climate activists to be able to better communicate climate change. And that's when and that was the perfect opportunity for me, because at that time I was still, I had no experience in writing. I was just trying to express my anger towards the government and everyone. So Climate Tracker taught me how to communicate climate change and climate education in simple ways, but also in effective ways. So people who read my article can understand the topic and understand how it's linked to their life. So then in 2016, I went to my first COP, COP22 in Marrakesh, Morocco. And after that, I joined the Climate Tracker staff team, and I've been working with them ever since then. So just to give a quick overview of the work that we do at Climate Tracker. So Climate Tracker aims to, we try to empower young emerging journalists and activists all over the world to better communicate climate change in their communities and to be able to contribute to raising the environmental and climate awareness in their community generally. We are a network of, we are an organization, and throughout the years, we have managed to form a network of over 12,000 members from, I would say, all over the world. And we started working in 2015. In 2015 alone, we managed to connect with people in 150 countries. And just last year, because of our programs and workshops, we managed to publish a total of 1,200 articles related to different environmental and climate change topics. And we conducted 12 workshops, 12 regional and national workshops in different regions in the world. So the work that we do is we offer a variety of things and ways to work with people. We conduct workshops, and these are in-person workshops to train people about climate education, climate communication, and also some of the most important climate topics in that country where we're hosting the workshop. And it's a way to connect with people on a personal level and also try to share skills and try to help them develop their skills and be better writers and communicators. We also conduct campaigns, and I think this is a way for us to engage with our online, because as I mentioned, we have a huge online network. So campaigns are a way for us to connect with them and make sure that they're still engaged and they're still working towards climate communication and climate education. We also have, we also give out international conferences fellowships. So in all of our projects, we try as much as possible to get funding in order to give journalists from countries that we work on, especially global South countries and especially women. We usually try to bring those people to international climate conferences like the COP, so they can be able to report those important meetings to their country and can be the voice for their country over there. Finally, we also do online fellowships, which is kind of like a workshop, but online, where we, and it's more customized, where we train people from different regions for a specific period in order to help them raise their skills, also follow up with their progress and make sure that they are progressing, they are writing in better ways, they are publishing in bigger newspapers, and they are reaching more people. We are happy, and we're always happy, and we would love to work with anyone, or anyone can be part of our network. So if you're ever interested or you want to join us, you can check any of our social media. You can connect with me personally, or you can just visit our website. It's the same as the logo, climatetracker.org. I really look forward to this discussion, and thank you everyone again. Back to you, Melissa.
Okay, thank you for sharing this information. I think this will be very valuable for many people attending this webinar. And okay, now since now you are presenting yourself, I think we can now go to the second part of the webinar, that is the discussion that we are going to start related the topic that came us together tonight, to this day, and we are talking about education, gender equality, and why it's important to talk also about climate justice in this context of climate change, of course. So first of all, I want to mention now, since I listened your presentations and you already mentioned what is the situation of the education in your countries and in your region. So for start a discussion about education in the context of climate change, I would like to go to now Alejandra. Can you, Alejandra, please share us how the education regarding climate change is in Peru, or you can talk about even the region, I think so.
Thank you, Meili. That's a huge question. I don't know if I'll be able to respond what's the state of education climate change in Peru, but what I can tell you is why education is so important for climate change, and particularly for women, right? And I wanted to, because I know that we have like limited time, I wanted to focus on, at least in Peru, and rural women and in rural indigenous women, right? And how is the situation there. As I said before, there are like different forms of oppression, and that's what it caused like a differentiated impact from climate change. And I know that that's probably the same situation in many countries in the global south. So I just wanted to give an example. For example, for food security, right? For food security, education has been identified as one of the most important socioeconomic indicators to actually guarantee food security in rural areas. So, but that's also contradictory in Peru, because a lot of women in Peru, and the levels of poverty are very high. In the rural area in Peru, 49% of single parent households led by women live in poverty. And this is really, really tied, and it's really connected to the access to education women have in rural areas. So how can women be ready for climate change, or be ready to find adaptation ways for climate change if the structural issues and oppressions they're facing are so unequal, right? So that's one case. Of course, there's as Heeta already mentioned, the and Lina also, the education about climate change and the information around climate change, it's different, and it has different levels. But I think that people, particularly outside of Lima, and Lima is a capital city, and outside of Lima and outside of the urban areas, can actually experience what is happening with climate change. So maybe they don't know like the negotiation, what's going on with the climate negotiations or the Paris Agreement or the NDCs, but people know that something is happening. So yeah, I think it's how can we connect their experiences, the daily experiences, with the policy, right? How do we really bridge that? How do we connect that, make that bridge possible? So yeah.
Thank you for your response. Heeta, I would like to go now to you, because I know that you are now the focal point for the Global South, and you work in parallel and in collaboration with the focal point for the Global North. In that experience that you were now going into working with the Global North representatives, like I will say activists, and the Global South also, how do you think the differences between the education that we have between each other are? How is the difference? What do you want to share about that? Why it's important to address the global south in the topic of education?
Sure, thank you, Melissa. That's a very interesting question. So in my interaction so far, and with all the interaction that I've had over the years with Yango, of course, people from different parts of the world have different knowledge and different experiences when it comes to the climate crisis. Especially because I'm interacting with young people who are mainly within the realm of the UNFCCC negotiations. So they have a background of climate change, so they understand what is happening, what's not. So from that point of view, more or less everyone understands. I mean, they're well educated at least about what's happening with climate change. But when you look at it from a different perspective, sometimes people from the global north have spoken about it in school, have more like volunteer opportunities in youth groups, have seen more, like even now when we talk about school strikes and Fridays for Future, it picked up first in developed countries because it was easier for kids, for students to gather to create this sort of momentum within them. And on the contrary, when we wanted to do it in India, the first global strike that we did in my city of Mumbai was in March in 2018, I can't remember. But the first global strike that we did, it was only 30 people on the streets. So that is the amount of lack of awareness that is there within the public. And even if they do know about it, there's some sort of lack of motivation to go and do it because we haven't yet understood the seriousness. Of course, as of today, a lot of more people have understood, a lot more young people are speaking about it, are active in Fridays for Future. So that number has changed. It's gone up dramatically. When you look at it internationally, it does take a while for these sort of movements, or especially youth-led movements, to pick up in global south countries, because number one, it could be a lack of awareness, lack of education. Number two, it could be safety. It is a different scenario going out on the streets in the United States or in somewhere in Europe, and it is a different scenario going out in the States somewhere in India or Sudan or Lima. There is the whole sort, and especially when it's kids, when it's people under the age of 16, 18 going out, their parents, at least I know parents in India, are going to be very, very scared of letting their kids go out alone. And even when it comes to schools, academics is taken at a whole different level of, importance that is given to school and curriculum academics more than extracurricular in India, or like co-curricular. So you can do what you want over the weekend, but you are not going to miss school by any cost. So it definitely takes a lot to push it, to sort of create this action. But I think now, at least, like the wave is picking up. People are realizing more and more about the climate crisis, especially we're seeing it so much in India these days. During Corona times, we've experienced forest fires just this week. We've experienced a cyclone of intensity 5, so the highest intensity cyclone last week. We're currently experiencing swarms of locusts across the country. So we're in the midst of also an environmental crisis along with a health crisis. And I think people now are realizing about it and talking more and more.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's very important. It's very important to know the differences. This is why we also wanted to promote during this public climate school this kind of webinar where we can share what is happening in the countries in the global south. Now, Lina, I would like to go to you now, and now because I want to put this question to you because during your presentation you were explaining us that in the program from Climate Tracker you promote that not just all the activists but especially women can get access to these scholarships and can get part of the climate agenda. So I would like to know from you for what is the relation between gender and climate change? Why Climate Tracker are especially focused and promote these programs focused for empowering women?
Thank you so much, Melissa. Well, I wanted to first reflect on how important climate education is, and this is why at Climate Tracker we usually focus on giving people chance, especially women, because climate change does not affect people equally. Women, it's a fact known that women are more impacted by climate change impacts all over the world. And I think education, climate education is very important because, as I mentioned, I was 15 when I found out about climate change first time. And it wasn't even through school. It was through my curiosity. Like, my curiosity led me to read about it, but I've never heard of it in school. And I think this is a problem that I don't want to generalize, but I think most global South countries, education never focus on these topics. And that is a problem because education is a driver for awareness. And when communities become more aware of what they are, of what's at stake, like I know people right now, even when they think about climate change, they don't think of it as a cross-cutting issue. They don't think about how it affects their income, their life. They only think about climate change as a separate topic, as a secondary topic that we will address at some time, but not now. We need to focus on economy, we need to focus on the war and the virus, but they never link them together. So this is why climate education is important, because you need to understand that climate change is a cross-cutting topic and it does affect your life. You just don't know it. And if people become more aware of this, I think they will be able to push for better policies. Because right now, most global South countries, the governments, they are free to do whatever they want with climate change and climate policies because they know that the public is not going to care because the public is not aware. So climate education helps people become more aware, and in turn, they will be able to push and pressure their governments into acting better and having better climate policies. And in terms of women, there's a lot of studies. I think there's a lot of studies done already on climate change impacts on gender, but I don't think there has been enough researches on how on women vulnerability to climate change. And I also think that something that that is always being done wrong is even when international institutions and NGOs try to offer help for women in developing countries, they usually don't include women in the conversation about the solutions. So they just come in, they think of a solution and they put it, and that solution usually doesn't fit with the reality of what women are facing. And this is why it's very important when you are trying to design a solution for not just women, but youth, children, indigenous community, you have to make sure that they are part of the conversation and they are part of making their own solutions, because they are more aware of their problem than anyone else, and they deserve every right to be part of this conversation. And this is what we try to do at Climate Tracker. We try to give women and people from communities that are usually marginalized to speak up more, to talk about their issues from their side, from how they see it, and be able to promote it to the rest of the world. And we're just trying to fill this gap, I would say.
Well, thank you so much for this. I think it's very, very important what you just mentioned. Is the education, the role of women in our countries is very important to achieve what you say, a change, or to reach the policymakers to do really a change for us. Alejandra, I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, just something very, very tiny related to what Lina and Heeta have been saying, just to build on what they were saying about awareness. It's like, I think awareness is, of course, I think an issue, but I think it also has to do, I guess what I'm trying to say is that climate change and gender, for me, from the way I see it, has to do with power, has to do with justice, has to do with the structural problems, with the structural issues that need to be addressed. So I think it's important to frame the climate justice crisis as part of power relations. That it's not that climate change happens here, as you probably all know, but I think all that is connected. So I guess, as I said, maybe the awareness, of course, is different in each city, in each country in the global south, and also within each country. In Peru, for example, there is like a global north and a global south within our country. There is the inequality in our own countries. Inequalities are huge. So in Peru, we have people that are from the global north, like they're incredibly wealthy, and as it's in everywhere in the world, the rich have more every day and the poor have less every day. So how do we talk and discuss about climate change in this reality, right? Like, I think it's important to also make those connections as part of the discussion when we try to talk about climate change. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you for your intervention. I think it is now very clear how and why it's important to continue, to continue making this effort in order to address education and gender equality and many, many topics more related to climate change in the Global South. Now, since we already touched this point that education and gender, I would really like to give you time. I don't know who wants to start with this, but why it's important to talk about also climate justice. Alejandra, you already mentioned why climate justice, but someone wants to share an example that can address the climate justice, why it's important for the Global South, especially to work in this agenda.
Yeah, I think I can. This actually links very well with Alejandra's last point, where she spoke about the socioeconomic disparity in countries, and it's the same in India, where there are pockets of people who are very well-to-do, but there are right next to that pockets of people who are really, really socioeconomically backward. And this is exactly where the whole idea of climate justice comes from, where it says that climate change is how do you say, climate change is more or less created by a certain section or a few countries or a few sort of section of society, but the people and the sections of society most affected by climate change are the ones that have least contributed to the problem. And that is exactly what we see. The most marginalized are usually people from developing countries, are usually the Global South, but also within that, it's people who do not have the resources to fight the impacts of climate change. Like, for example, we're seeing it in India with the entire the economic crisis that we've been facing right now because of the lockdown. The first people to be affected were the people who did not have corporate jobs, who did not have fixed jobs, people who had only day-to-day jobs, was daily wage laborers or migrants who had moved from their villages to cities to work. And because of this sudden shutdown, they were left jobless all of a sudden. And it's very similar when it comes to a climate crisis, because if there is a flood, if there is a drought, for example, the cyclone that we had just last week in East India, the villages at the coast were the first ones and the most that suffered the most of the impact of the cyclone, whereas the cities inside, while of course they did suffer a large amount of impact, it was much less as compared to the villages on the coast. And it's similar when we talk about farmers. When we have floods in India, we're seeing our weather patterns, our monsoon patterns, our rainfall patterns are shifting year after year. And there are, like this year itself, in the month of April, we'd had unprecedented rainfall and hailstorm in North India, which we've never had usually over the past few years. And this led to a lot of crops being destroyed. This has led to the direct livelihoods of farmers being affected. And we see this every year for different cases. And it's the same with the urban poor, where they don't have proper houses to live in. A lot of them live on the streets, and the food crisis, the water crisis affects them immediately. And this is where the whole idea of climate justice comes in, where those guys have contributed least to the problem, but they are the first ones to sort of face the impact of the climate crisis. So, yeah.
Thank you, Heeta. Lina, do you want to share something? What is happening? What is the status, let's say, of the situation in Africa, in Sudan?
Yeah, of course. So as you all know, I think Africa is, Europe is starting to get better, which are really good news. But for Africa, we're still heading towards the peak. No one knows exactly what's going on. But if we take my country, for example, we've been, I think this is our 8th week in lockdown. We've been in lockdown for the past 2 months. And the reality is that most people in Sudan depend on their daily income to live. And with being locked down for 2 months means that a lot of families now don't have a source of income, and they're probably struggling a lot. And unfortunately, them going out means there will be risking themselves to danger, but also that not everyone is receiving benefits from the government. So it's a very critical and it's a very critical situation. It's kind of a dilemma that does show us how unready we are for a global crisis. Like if you think about it, I think coronavirus can be taken as a good example that we're not ready for whatever is coming. Like if this was a war, I'm sure countries would have been ready because that's what they prioritize their budgets for. But they never prioritize budget for infrastructure and health systems and climate policies. And I think if there's any lesson to be learned from this pandemic, is that we need to shift our priorities and we need to start thinking about what actually matters. And this should be taken as a warning of what climate change can do to us, because I'm sure what climate change, if we don't act together, and the climate impacts are going to be as severe, if not more, and we're not ready for it. We know this now, and we need to work together to make sure that to avoid the situation, and even if the worst happens, we need to make sure that we're ready for it, and we'll be able to adapt and respond to it. So I think so.
Yeah, that is totally right what you are saying. I think regarding the corona crisis, we are learning a lot how we need still to work in order to promote health systems, education systems, and so on. Alejandra, do you want to share something?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to build on and to comment on what Heeta said, and how these how climate justice translates into the negotiations, and how climate justice can be actually become policy at some point, if that ever happens. And I think it's important to again bring the discussions of historical responsibilities. I know that climate justice movements push for that a lot, but how does that translate in the text, right? In the climate change text, and maybe Heeta can comment after. But they're like, what happens with the damages that already happened? What happens, because they're always talking about adaptation. Yeah, that's adaptation is good, but what happened with people that already lost everything, right? What happened with cities and communities that already lost everything? So how are they going to supposed to adapt to something that it's already gone, right? So like giving more importance to loss and damage. I think, Heeta, if I'm making any mistake about the text, just let me know. I haven't been in the UN for those negotiations for a while, but again, that's one thing, right? Like, what are we prioritizing in the text when we're negotiating climate change? Another thing, who has more power within the negotiations, right? What are we negotiating? Who's negotiating? Who has a louder voice in the table? And which proposals for solutions have been pushed to be passed? Like, where they're talking about geoengineering and techno things that will help us, and then none of those have like been proved to be effective. They might increase inequality. So again, let's how, like, I don't know, like, how can we actually push for a policy for a text that that actually reflects all the discussions we're having around climate justice? And that's why climate justice is necessary, because we need to talk about history. Because today it's not like climate change didn't happen today, it happened for a reason, right? Developed countries have developed over 200 years, maybe more, on the expenses of developing countries and resources and extractivism. So that needs to be considered when we discuss climate policy in general.
Thank you so much. I think you exemplarize in a very clear way how we still need to continue working on what are our challenges. And I just want to finalize with this question in order to pass for the third part of the webinar, that is like the question and answer from the audience. Please, you can continue to type your questions in the chat. And yeah, the last question for this part, second part, is I see from your experience, from my experience also working in the climate change field, that it's very important to the work from the society to the community that we build between each other in order to continue going forward these kind of challenges that we have in our countries, in our communities, and in our cities. So why it's important to keep working on that? Why it's important like give the voices to the indigenous people, from or to the women from or youth people or children in this matter of climate change. Someone want to share something?
Okay, I can just to sort of break the ice. I think some very important points have been covered, and your question, Melissa, is spot on. From everything that we've been talking about, we've realized like where the issues are lying, from where the climate crisis is affecting, it affects very disproportionately across the world. But at the same time, we have to realize that indigenous communities or sort of local communities have been practicing solutions for the past so many years, which have actually probably not been brought to the limelight. And they have the answers to live a life which you live while respecting nature and to live sustainably with our environment. And I was just reading this morning that in the world, I think 70% of the world's poor are women. And that's a huge number of women that are affected economically, but also with the economic impacts and the climate impacts that come along with that. So usually women are the first ones who are left either in the rural areas because the men leave and go to cities for work. So they are the first ones if there's a drought or a flood, they're sort of first affected because they're managing the farmlands back home. They're also usually, at least in India, women in villages, they need to walk a long distance sometimes to fetch water for their daily use. And with changing weather patterns, with more drought, it is definitely becoming, they have to go longer distances more and more. So usually they make their daughters drop out of school to help them because the daughters need to go with the mothers to fetch water and come back home. So it's the same with the nutrition. Men or their sons are usually given their meal first and make sure that they're eaten their full. And only then will the girls and the women of the house eat. And sometimes there's not enough food left for them in the house. So women suffer nutritional deficiencies compared to the same to men of the same family. So I think we do need to realize that the impacts, if there is I think we're talking about when there are environmental crisis, it definitely affects very disproportionately across genders as well, across with other divides. And what we need to do is just continue doing what we're doing, because we need to amplify their voices. We need to make sure that if they cannot be at international platforms, for example, we can take their voices there, make sure that their voices are heard, and likewise bring it back home, because like Alejandra said, all these negotiations, but what are we negotiating? Our future is not negotiable. The future of young people is not negotiable. These are certain things that need participation from young people, that need participation from these groups that have been left out for the years, and their voices need to be within the process, and they need to be the ones taking these decisions, and not these boys club that sort of goes around making decisions for everyone everywhere. Thank you.
So,
Amelia, I just wanted to add just a little. I just wanted to add something, and I think your question was also related to the community. How do we build community? Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think as Heeta said, I think there are different spaces to fight against climate change, right? Different spaces of organizing. From us in Tierra Activa, we organize. We try to organize in different ways. We try to be more connected to our territories. We're a national network, so we try to be as connected as possible, considering the limitations we might have, to be connected to our community. So I think our proposal too has to do with our connection to our territories. And of course, negotiations and international policy is a way to go, but I think it's not the only way to go. I think people in the global south are in the world, they're organizing and are resisting and are fighting for a better life, not only for climate change, but in the context of COVID right now, people are organizing to survive. And I think I think you find a lot of strength and love and community and hope from those communities. And I think, that's, and I think we should also put our energies there, like try to like take our minds out of this capitalist system that's always like individualistic, right? You need to think about yourself first, and you and your development and your education, and you second, you third, or you always you first, and shift our minds and rethink how are we living, right? And try to learn from other experiences. That's what I was saying. Like, how do we decolonize climate policy? How do we decolonize? And how? And I'm talking decolonizing because, as I said, Peru is a post-colonial country, right? And there's a legacy that still come with us after that colonialism. So we need to rethink. We need to, like, I don't know, try to reimagine a new world, right? And I think that the only way to do that is from our communities. But yeah, I guess policy has also, like, yeah, self-important, but I guess, and well, in my case now academia, but I'm not very sure.
Yeah, but academia is totally related to the next step to become a policy. I mean, at least it's what it has to be, no? But yeah, we need to still working on that to make it come true. Lina, do you want to say
Can I add something, Melissa?
Right.
All right, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to build on what Alejandra said about, I think right now, everyone is focused on the climate communications and how they're very critical for us to survive. And this is true in some sense, but also if you ever go to the ground, to those communities that are on the front line of climate change, people have managed to find ways to adapt and to survive. And I think this is also a problem with the narrative of climate change. People usually, especially, I've seen this especially in African countries, they usually view Africa as a dying nation. And I wrote about this recently. In every article, you usually say that Africa is dying, we need to help Africa, climate communications need to be faster, which is true, but also there are people and communities in Africa have managed to figure out solutions for themselves, have managed to survive, and they have indigenous knowledge that is, and I'm sure it's better than any negotiations. So just to build on what she said, I think it is very important that if we want to help, we should put our effort over there. People are already doing great work. They just need more funding, more support. And this is a right way to do so. And this is the faster way to make solutions, because honestly, I was in Madrid last year in the COP25, and I'm sure everyone who was there have witnessed the huge climate march that was happening on Friday, where 500,000 people were protesting, while I'm sure negotiators in the room were probably debating or fighting over one word in a text. So in some sense, climate negotiations are very slow, they're very technical, they're very political, and I'm sure we get something out of it, but we shouldn't be depending on it only. We should be looking into other ways to help communities and just forget politics. So I just wanted to add this.
Yeah, totally. Fair enough. Fair enough. Your comment. I think, yeah, what is this big community of negotiations or negotiators happening every year, just showing us that, yeah, I think we need to look for another way how we want to achieve the climate goals. So yeah, now we are going to pass to the third part of the webinar. So we are now reading some questions that come from the audience. And yeah, we are going to start. Thank you for this, Helena and Toni, for helping in this part. They are from Friday Students for Future, Kiel. Okay, the first question is, I think this is related to education. Yeah, it's come from Alberto Niquen from Peru. He's a journalist, and he's asking to the three panelists here how we need to, what is the role of media in your countries, and how we need to be sure that we also educate by the media, right? The communication, I mean.
I can start there. So well, I know Alberto from Peru. He's been covering climate and environment for a long time. As I said at the beginning, I'm a communicator, and I've been working in environmental communications, like climate communications for a while now. And I think I don't know what you guys think, but I think media is key, because media help us shape like like the like ideology too, right? And I think in Peru, and I know if it happens in other places, I'm sure it does, is that climate change again. On one hand, we have climate change negotiations, right? That for the majority of people, it's like, what? You never like, what is like? People don't know what climate negotiations means, and the texts are so boring and so complicated. And actually, to get into the text, you need to be like an expert or so. So and when we like people talk about like the climate change, the climate in Paris like as a huge success, but the way it's covered, I think, has to do with again what what Heeta and Lina said, like the lack of information. And I think one piece that they leave outside, and a piece that they leave outside, is that they depoliticize climate change in general. They talk about climate change as has been said before, as something that's going to, like, something that's happening, something that will address at some point, like an environmental issue, right? So I think what it's missing is that we need to make the climate change discussion political discussion. And I'm not talking about politics and political parties. I'm talking about how can we make this like, yeah, like more part of our lives, in our daily lives, right? How can we discuss about climate change in relation to poverty, to solutions, to knowledge, to, and so I think the only way to do it if we like connect those dots, right? And I think media has not been good at doing that. And I think in Peru, at least, it's what happens.
Yeah, I think just adding on to that, I think it was spot on. And both Lina and Alejandra mentioned about like how in negotiations we're focusing on text, and it's a whole different world of itself. But what doesn't get out is the complexity of the process. What doesn't get out is how difficult it is, but also how impossible it is just to rely on the COPs or the UN to sort of make the world a better place. It's you and I who need to work together, and we need we need the media to sort of shout it out loud to everyone, saying that it's not somebody else's job, it's your job and it's my job. And we're clearly missing the link between smaller environmental issues versus the entire, in relation to the entire climate crisis, where we're not connecting the dots of the small discussions, we're not connecting the dots of the small problems that happen here and there across the world. And while there are some incredible journalists in India and outside who are doing amazing work talking about the environment, talking about climate change, it's still a very small pocket. And mainstream journalism is very, sensational, what will make headlines tonight sort of news. And unfortunately, environment doesn't make headlines. So it's not dinner table conversation. And I think that's what we need to change. We need to sort of move ahead and move away from just putting news and media as, sensation, but actually giving concrete information to the public, because media actually gives us or shapes our worldview in a certain sense from the information that you receive. And I think that's where the crucial role is still missing until today.
Thank you, Heeta. Lina, do you want to share something?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Alberto, for your question. I think the media has a key role to play generally when it comes to climate awareness, which, as I mentioned before, is one of the drivers for pushing governments to better climate policies. And I must admit that in most countries, media hasn't been doing a great job. And that can be to lack of awareness from the journalists as well. But I think media can help bridge the knowledge gap in climate change, because then I'm sure they really care what happened in the last COP or what's happening in the next COP. They don't care, but they will care if you tell them how climate change is affecting their life. If you link it, if the farmer can read your article, listen to a radio show, and understand that, well, climate change is the reason why my is no longer producing as much and my soil is being impacted. So if we can make climate change linked to people's daily life and people's income, they will be aware. And I think this is a role that media can drive and media can lead on. But sadly, so far we've been doing a really bad job at it. And even when climate change, they usually try to go for the dramatic part, like, "Whoa, the world is ending. We are dying in 50 years." So, and this is not the right message. We shouldn't be looking at climate change from a negative perspective. I think it's good to give people the sense of alarming and how it's a crisis, but it's also important to show to use climate journalism as a way to encourage people and tell them how they can contribute in the fight against climate change. So this is why media is very
Thank you, Lina. Very clear, also very clear point. I would like to now address the second question. It comes from Siva from India. It's related to climate change policies. Okay, she asked, has there been any fruitful incorporation of sustainable development goals in the narrative of climate change? I mean, I think she means that if you know already some countries that were being able to put into the agenda from the sustainable development goals in their national agenda, I mean.
I can start with that. To be honest, Ziva, right? I'm not well informed about how the SDGs are being implemented. But what I can tell you, I can talk a little bit about the NDCs, the National Determined Contributions. Yeah, national NDCs, yeah. For Peru, and I can tell you that at least in that, at least for Peru, the NDCs are not incorporating explicitly, at least in the text, issues of justice, right? They're focusing on adaptation and mitigation issues. That, of course, everything. I think it's. I mean, again, we can't separate sustainable goals versus climate change or adaptation and mitigation goals, right? It's like, and that's what really like strikes me every time, is that this compartmentalization. That's what I like, this the separation of different issues, right? As they are like, yeah, mitigation happens here, adaptation happens here, SDGs happen here. So everything is in a different box, right? So yeah, I think at least in the NDCs, issues of gender are not included. They are like, just as I said, as I wrote in my presentation, it's been used as a buzzword. And I think in development policy in general, gender has become a buzzword that has completely lost the meaning that had from a feminist perspective, right? Like, yeah, let's just add gender there, and yeah, let's invite more women. And it's, gender is not about women, right? Again, gender is also about power. So how do we change those power structures? Those kind of discussions, at least in the NDCs, are not in the Peruvian NDCs that have been presented to the UNFCCC have not been included, or not being discussed seriously, at least. So I would dare to say the SDGs would be the same, but I'm not sure. I don't want to affirm something I'm not sure.
What about in India or Sudan, or if you have experience in another countries working on Heeta or Lina?
Yeah. So when it comes, like, actually, I resonate a lot with what Alejandra said already. There is, I mean, it's all interlinked, and there should be cross-cutting work throughout, whether it's the SDGs, because even the 17 SDGs are actually all interlinked with each other at some level. But what I've been seeing is that there is some work going on with the SDGs. There are organizations or non-governmental organizations that focus on a certain, either on education or focus on poverty or focus on water or whatever else, that do say that we're working on SDG 13, SDG 11, 15, whatever. But I think I'm not too sure how this feeds into the government policy making. or how this intertwines with whether policies are made based on the SDGs. I think that from what I know so far, and I could be wrong, but from what my understanding is that the policies are still made, and then there are UN country offices and organizations that work along with sometimes the UN country offices, sometimes by themselves, sometimes with the government, who sort of then focus on what sort of SDG they're working on, but not in direct, how do you say, like not directly coming from the government saying that our policy is on SDG 6, for example. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, just to build on what Alejandra said, I think, and to give context, if Siva is not aware or like not familiar with the NDCs, as Alejandra mentioned, are the nationally determined contributions. They're like goals put on by the government in order to showcase how they will be tackling climate change, adapting and mitigating to it, and how it will be linked to their national policies. In theory, NDCs are a great idea. And are a great way to not just negotiate climate change, but also to make sure that the governments are actually working on it, working on fulfilling their promises, and are linking it to their national agenda. As I said, in theory, it's great, but in practice, sadly, most countries, and I can give an example of my country in Sudan, we haven't updated our NDCs yet. The NDCs that we submitted were very poorly written, not strategically put, or I don't think they even thought about it well. And now we have a new government. So the new government needs to rethink the NDCs. And this is also to show that how politics affect climate change, because when you have a new government, the new government will have new policies and new ideas for environment and climate change. So they will change everything the last government was working on. They will put their new agenda. So we're still waiting on the new version of the NDCs from Sudan. It hasn't been submitted yet, but I'm sure it's not going to be as great as everyone is expecting, and that's because most governments don't really rethink this or put effort into it, but rather just do it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, thank you, Alejandra. Yeah, you can add.
Mel, I just wanted to add something to that. Is also that NDCs are not legally binding, and I think that's a major thing that need to be like addressed. Like NDCs are not it's a commitment, right? So it will depend on each country if they want to do it. And also, at least I wanted to tell in the Peruvian NDCs, yes, as Lina said, in theory they're good. They're well intended, right? It's a good idea, but what happens with good ideas when you have no money behind it, no money to implement, no capacity to implement? So yeah.
Yeah, I think just talking, like, the entire Paris Agreement is not legally binding. So we're talking about a framework, implementing from 2020. I don't know if it's going to happen this year. This year is like a black year, so I really don't know. But anyway, the entire agreement is not legally binding, and it's historic for the only reason because it is a big deal for 197 countries to agree to a text. It's difficult even for 5 people in a room to agree on a favorite color, for example. So you can imagine the difficulty it takes to agree on a whole sort of pages and pages where every single word, comma, full stop, you can discuss days and nights about. But yeah, I mean, we're talking about a framework that is not legally binding. We're talking about a framework which, when you add the NDCs to it, as of today, does not lead us to a global temperature rise of anywhere near what the Paris Agreement says. We're actually heading towards global temperature rise of 3 to 4 degrees higher than pre-industrial levels. And that, for different parts of the world and for different countries, is actually a matter of life and death. And it's high time countries realize what they're actually talking about, what they're negotiating for so long, because they're negotiating people's lives here. And depending on how strong you decide to take action, where your NDC is actually implemented, so India again also hasn't submitted its second or its revised NDCs, and it doesn't even intend to, because India is saying that our NDCs are good. We're on a line to roughly about a 2-degree warmer world, so we don't need to update our NDCs. So, well, it's really, I think countries need to reprioritize and reorganize what they're thinking for them and also for the future generations of the different countries.
Yeah, now coming to following your ideas that you get in your response, I'm just thinking about the situation that we are now struggling on a corona crisis. So, I mean, this year we're supposed to have the COP26, and when we supposed also to start to like create this framework to start to use the Paris Agreement like legally, no? But then now it was postponed, and no one knows what is going on behind. If they are doing really something in order to achieve something for the 2020 or not. And I would like to ask you three, if how the situation of the corona crisis has postponed like, I don't know, let's say projects in your countries or something regarding climate change, of course. Do you have something to share about that?
I can jump on this. Let me start by saying that I think the postponement of COP26 is very unfortunate, but it's also unavoidable. It's the reality that we live in, and it had to be postponed because this will be risking thousands of lives, and it's unrealistic to host it. But I don't think you can postpone COP26, but I don't think you should postpone climate action. And essentially, what was important to happen this year, besides COP26, is that most countries were supposed to submit a new ambitious NDCs. So now what I want to see and what I hope to see is that countries are not going to use the fact that COP was postponed in order to not work on the NDCs or not give it a priority this year, but rather they should be working on their NDCs and make sure that it's actually ambitious and better than the previous ones. So as I said, COP26 was postponed, and it's unfortunate. But climate action should not be postponed. Government should still be working, and this should not be taken as an excuse to postpone the work because we don't have time. We're running out of time, and we really need to work as fast as we can on this.
All right. Alejandra or Heeta want to add something regarding that?
Yeah, I can. Oh, okay. I'll be quick, Heeta. I just wanted to say, like, again, COVID is bringing out the problems that have been there forever, at least in Peru, and I think in many countries, even here where I'm living right now in the United States. It's amazing how like this crisis has like put the light on all the structural problems that exist in the world, right? So so I think I don't know exactly what is going on in terms of climate policy or climate policy in Peru. I know that there have been discussions around national policy on climate change, but for what I know right now, it's mostly based. All the government efforts are focused on health and trying to control COVID. But I just wanted to say that, for example, mining activities have been going on, and certain laws are being passed and certain groups are being benefit from this COVID. So I think it's also interesting how to see like how neoliberalism is shaping and reshaping in this COVID crisis. But that's probably another conversation.
No, thank you so much, because I think it's very important to mention in this. I think that it's not part of another conversation. It's a very large conversation that probably we are going to create regarding neocolonialism, post-colonialism, and so on. But yeah, thank you for addressing this. Heeta, you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you. It actually, on very similar lines, we've been in lockdown for more than 2 months in India now, and our Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has given environmental clearances to so many projects across the country. It's really, if it wasn't so serious, I would be laughing. It's that funny. The number of clearances that have gone out across the country. There have been clearances in Northeast India to build coal mines, to build hydro power dams, in ecologically sensitive and highly biodiverse areas, areas which have species that are not seen in other parts of the world. So definitely, like Alejandra said, the lockdown is benefiting a lot of people, or at least a certain section of people. And we're seeing how important the climate crisis actually is to governments across the world. And I think this is the best way where we're seeing what is actually priority for the government at this moment. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this. Yeah, I think we already the deadline for the third part. I mean, now we have kind of 6 minutes to every one of us now present a reflection about this webinar, something that you want to say regarding the topic and that you think is important for every one of us, for the audience and the people who is going to watch us afterwards. I don't know who wants to start.
Yeah, I can start, and I would like to use this last minute to address the last question that Sophie made. And it's that it's about like this pressure on women, like the pressure is women live opposed to men. I think in general for development policy and for climate policy, women are framed, and many feminist scholars some write about this, particularly in the development policy area. Like women are framed as like the heroes, as Sophie's saying, like this pressure of, yeah, women have the power to do this, women have the agency to do this, and at the same time are framed as the victims, right? Because they are going to be the most impacted. They are both. So this narrative, it's probably not ideal for when we're discussing the climate crisis and the role of women too, because we also have to remember that women are already facing another multiple oppressions in their lives, right? Like poverty, education, violence, right? Let's keep in mind the patriarchal society we live in. Like we're facing many issues. So she's asking, how do we get out of this vicious cycle? I don't know. I think we're trying to find ways to do it, but again, I think for me it has to do with connecting back to our territories, to our experiences, to people's experiences and body experiences, and listen and try to think as a community, as a global community. And try to transform and try to think of gender not just as a buzzword. Try to think of gender and climate change as a transformative way, as a transformative power to actually make a better world. And yeah, I think I want to finish on a positive point. Yep.
Thank you, Alejandra. Lina, do you want to share now your final words?
Yeah, sure. I want to say how beautiful what Alejandra just said. It's very important to have this in mind, and I think conversations like this give us a chance to express opinions and share knowledge that usually where it's not easily accessible. And we also need to always keep in mind that I think this pandemic should be taken for us as a lesson to what happens next, and we should hold ourselves accountable, and we try to hold our governments accountable for better climate policies and to better address the climate crisis. And yeah, we should just keep this as a reminder. And I was really happy to be part of this, and I really enjoyed this discussion. Like, there's a lot of points there that was really useful for me to think of. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you, Lina. Heeta.
Thank you. And yeah, first of all, of course, like Lina just said, you know, this space to have this conversation is great, and it's already one step in the right direction where we're talking about things, we're going out and spreading awareness about the issues that are happening back home in our communities. I think what I would like to end with is just that we are all part of nature, whether we whatever we choose to do in life, we cannot separate us and our activities away from the natural world, no matter how hard we might want it to be. And we have just one world to live in. We have just one home. There is no planet B. So I think every action that we take as individuals and as a society, we need to be mindful. We need to be aware of what we're doing and the impact of our actions on the planet, whether it is just going out shopping or whether it is, you know, a full-fledged industrialized sort of community that you might be involved in. And at the same time, we need to realize what is important at the moment and where lives matter. We're seeing through this global health pandemic, people losing lives, but at the same time, we're seeing how lives are being lost because of an environmental crisis. We need to join the dots. We need to realize that these are not two individual things happening just by themselves somewhere, you know. They are interlinked, and with the environmental crisis, we're going to see more and more health issues coming up, more and more, possibly more pandemics, and that is going to be really, really dreadful. So I just want to say that we need to be aware of what we're doing, and we need to take action today because we're already running out of time. So thank you and good luck.
Thank you, Alejandra, Heeta, and Lina, for your time, for sharing your really nice ideas, your what you feel about every topic that we addressed today. I was just have a minute to share that I got from this this webinar. First of all, that there are many people that are really that really cares about this topic. From the beginning that I present this idea to give the people from the South, through the Global South, have voice in this public climate school. Many people were super agree, and they were very excited because, yeah, since this is a German version of the Fridays for Future, so mostly the agenda is like presented by Germans, even in German language. So I really want to thank you, the organizers from the Public Climate School, for letting me know, present this webinar, present your ideas. And what I just want to share very briefly is that from the Global South, we have a very challenging agenda to work on. I mean, we have the issues from education, we have the issues from gender inequality, from what Alejandra said that is important to mention is violence, food security, health system. We have a lot to work on, but what is important now and what we are seeing now in this webinar is that there are many initiatives coming from the civil society, from the small groups, from youth, from many groups. And there were many people also writing me while I was posting in Facebook and other networks that they are far from Africa, from Asia, and they are working on this, and they are very inspired to continue doing it, and they want to collaborate, and they want to create something because they think that it's important to work on that. And yeah, so at the same time, I feel like we need to do a lot in order to overcome this global problem. But in the other way, I feel very inspired because I know you, I know another initiatives that going on in the parallel, people that want to address specific things that they experience in the community, in the cities, and so on. So yeah, I'm keeping inspired for you and every people who want to share something. Please continue do it, continue acting. I think the climate agenda is very important, and everything is now correlated. We see in every example that we address today, climate change is related to every topic, every single topic, and we need to continue working. Every act is important and counts in order to struggle in this problem. And yeah, thank you so much again for joining to this webinar. I'm very excited now. I'm very happy to have this time with you for sharing and so on. Thank you so much. Thank you also, Frauke and Helena and Toni, that you are there. I think Fabi is also here. They are from Students for Future. And yeah, thank you so much. And I hope we can make another webinar in the future to talk about these topics that Alejandra put on the agenda, like colonialism, post-colonialism, neoliberal, and many things that is important also from when you talk about climate change from the global south perspective. Thank you so much, and have a nice evening and day wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining.